Okay, so if you're watching this video, we are reviewing for Chapter 1. Your test is tomorrow. Some important reminders for tomorrow. Make sure to bring your notebook, have that completed with all of your section summaries done. That is due not tomorrow, but by Tuesday. So if you don't get it to me in class because you took all hour to finish your quiz, make sure that you have that completed by Tuesday. And then also have your homework packet completed tomorrow, stapled and in order based on the table of contents. It cannot be out of place or out of order. You will lose points. Okay, so on your test, you will have, based on the 3 bullet points, you'll need to classify a polygon based on its number of sides, so make sure you know the names, quadrilateral, pentagon, etc. Be able to identify whether or not that polygon is convex or concave. Be able to define terms such as obtuse, complementary, adjacent. Know how to identify lines and planes. You will be given a diagram similar to your quiz where you're asked to name a pair of rays or opposite rays, etc. And then you will have to analyze an error. In addition to that, you will have questions like you see on the board before you. So we're going to take a look at number 1. It says, ray BD bisects angle ABC. You will have 2 questions on angle bisectors. So you really need to make sure you know how to do angle bisector questions. There are 2 of them that have 2 parts apiece. So if you miss the angle bisector questions, that's a lot of points on your test. So when we see BD bisects the angle ABC, what does that mean? Cuts it in 2, cuts it in half, bisects, sections it out into 2. It says that the measure of ABD is 52 degrees. So if I were taking this test and I came across that question, I would mark that, ABD. How do I mark that? I'm going to mark that with a little arc, and I'm going to put a little arrow here just to help me out. This is 52 degrees. Remember, the vertex is always in the middle, so I read that ABD, so I know they're talking about that specific angle. And the measure of angle 2 is 3x plus 1. That means that this angle is 3x plus 1. So what can I do to solve for the value of x? Set them equal, right. I'll have to set them equal to each other and solve. So when I do that, I say 3x plus 1 equals 52. And then, of course, subtract 1 on either side. 3x equals 51. Divide by 3. And divide by 3. And x equals 17. Now, I will give you a question that is similar to number 1, but I may also give you a question that gives you the measure of the entire angle. And if it asks you to do something similar, you'll have to know to split that entire angle into 2 so you can get each of these pieces. Does that make sense? Okay. So yes, 2 questions and then 4 problems total regarding angle bisectors. You will be given a diagram similar to number 2 where you're going to be asked the same 3 things. Name a pair of adjacent angles, name a pair of congruent angles, and name an obtuse angle. There is more than one correct answer for these, so don't feel pressured if you don't get exactly what I do, as long as it is, in fact, an adjacent angle or a congruent angle or an obtuse angle. So adjacent angles are angles that have a common vertex and a common side. So one example is angle RPS. What is the angle adjacent to angle RPS? If you look on that diagram. What's another adjacent angle? Adjacent means what? Next to. So what's next to angle RPS? Yes. Yeah, SPT. So angle SPT would work here. Of course, you have several pairs of adjacent angles, SPT and TPU, TPU and UPQ. Those are all adjacent pairs of angles. So you just have to name one of them, so you've got choices. Okay. So now it says name a pair of congruent angles. Well, in order to name a pair of congruent angles, notice you have to look back at what it tells you. And the biggest mistake that I see on a lot of geometry tests is they don't read all of the information. It says assume PU bisects TPQ. So it bisects this, which means what about these two angles in blue? They're the same. So that must mean they are congruent, right? So they each measure how much? The box means what? 90, so they each measure 45. Yes. So they are congruent. So you have angle TPU and angle UPQ or QPU. You can name it either way, remember? As long as that vertex is in the middle. Again, you've got several choices for obtuse angles as well. One that I found was angle QPS. What's another choice? Yeah, RPQ or QPR. Yep, that works as well. And you just have to name one on your test. You don't have to go crazy and name them all. So does everybody understand all of those? Feel comfortable with them tomorrow? Okay, let's move on. Now's the time to ask if you have any questions. All right, it says angles 1 and angles 2 form a linear pair. Draw this. Okay. If the measure of angle 1 is 4x plus 1 and the measure of angle 2 is 2x plus 1, find the measure of angle 1. So I don't know if they are going to be, if it's going to be perfectly 90 on both sides, so I'm just going to sketch a possibility. I know that linear pairs form what kind of angle? Starts with an S. Straight angle. Straight angle, and straight angles are supplementary, right? They add up to be 180. So linear, line, I think linear, and I think a line, so I'm going to draw a line. And then I'm going to just draw a ray or something so I can make the angles. I know that these two angles are going to add up to be 180. One of them is called angle 1, and the other one is called angle 2. Angle 1 and angle 2 add up to be 180, so I'm going to do that. 4x plus 1 plus 2x plus 8 equals 180 degrees. Then I'm going to, of course, combine my like terms. 6x plus 9 equals 180. Solve, subtract 9, subtract 9. 6x equals 171. Divide by 6 and divide by 6. And you get 28.5. Now, don't make the mistake of getting 28.5 and circling that as your answer. What do you have to do? Plug it in. So you take this and you plug it back in because the question's actually asking for the measure of angle 1. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So the measure of angle 1 is going to be 4 times that amount plus 1, which I believe is 115. Do you have a key on the back of this worksheet to double check your work if you want to go through it again tonight? Just to let you know, in case I write too fast or something. So that's question number 3. Does that make sense? Do you feel like you can do this so far? All right. Number 4, we didn't have on the station activity last time, but it will be on the test, so I want to go over it. You're going to have a question that deals with vertical angles. What do we know about the measurement of vertical angles? If they form an X, vertical angles form an X. And if they form an X, the angles that are across from each other are what? Do you remember? Congruent. They're the same measurement. So all angles across from each other are the same measurement. That's why they call them vertical angles. So this one's a bit tricky. The one on your test is going to be slightly easier than this one, but just slightly. So let's see. It says if the measure of angle 2 is x plus 15 and the measure of angle 4 is 2x plus 8, find the measure of angle 1. So that one's got several parts to it. 2 and 4 are across from each other, so that means their measurements are equal. Therefore, I do what to solve for x? What do I do? Yep, set them equal to each other. Since they're across from each other, I'm going to set them equal. X plus 15 equals 2x plus 8, and then solve. Subtract x, subtract x. 15 equals x plus 8, and of course subtract 8 on both sides, and you get x equals 7. Now, this is where it becomes tricky. So, x is 7, so you can plug in 7 to either angle 2 or angle 4, but that's not what they want. They want angle 1, right? So does everybody understand what I did for 4 before I move on to the next part of that question? Why I set them equal to each other? Yes? Okay, so what do you think I need to do to find angle 1? It's going to take multiple steps. What kind of angle does angle 1 and angle 4 form? What kind of angle is that in black right there? This angle. It's a straight angle. And how much degrees do straight angles add up to be? 180. So that's where the trick comes in. You're going to have to plug it in to angle 4 or angle 2, and then subtract that from 180, and then you'll finally get your angle measurement. Now on your test, am I going to make you do all of that? No. I will have you find the measurement of the vertical angles though. And you should know this. You should know that angle 1 and angle 4 are going to be 180 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to plug that into angle 4 or angle 2, either one. So when I do that, the measure of angle 4, we'll do this in blue, is 2 times the 7 plus 8. So that's going to be 22 degrees. So now I know that's the measure of angle 4. That's also the measure of angle 2. And now I find the measure of angle 1, so I subtract 180 from that, and I finally get my answer, which is 158. So that was a lot of steps. Do the steps make sense though? Logically, visually? Okay. You will have to find the distance between 2 points that are not horizontal, that do not form a horizontal segment or a vertical segment. So that means you have to use what formula? Distance, right? So as you can see, I'm only on question 5, and it's still taking quite a bit of time. So again, if you need to come early, make sure to do that. So I'm going to take the absolute value, or not the absolute value, I'm going to take the square root. And then remember, it's x2 minus x1 or y2 minus y1. It doesn't matter which order because you're going to square it. So whatever negatives you have, if you get a negatives, it doesn't matter because any negative squared is going to be positive. So I'm just going to start with my x's. You can start with your y's if you want. And I'm going to do negative 2 minus 5 quantity squared plus negative 1 minus negative 6 quantity squared. The one on the test is just going to give you a segment just like this. It's going to give you a segment picture, and then you just have to use the distance formula on the endpoints that they already give you. So it's not going to have to figure out, okay, which one do I use distance formula, which one do I not? No. The one that I'm going to give you, you will have to use distance formula, and I'll say use the distance formula. So when you do that, you should end up with 49 plus 25 square root. And so that's the square root of 74 units. Remember, you always have to have some sort of labeling. Questions on 1 through 5? No? Take your time. Remember that I am going to be grading this by hand, so I will look to see how much work you've done. I will give you partial credit where it's earned. The midpoint of AB is 6, negative 3, with A, one of the endpoints, being negative 2, negative 9. Find point B. So on your quiz, I asked you to find the midpoint. This time I'm asking you to find an endpoint given a midpoint. So this one's tricky for people, but I'm going to walk you through it step by step. On the test, when you encounter a problem that's exactly like this, here's what you do. You start with the endpoint that's given to you. Start with the x value, negative 2. And I need to find the other endpoint. I'm going to call that x for the x. I'm going to divide that by 2 because midpoint means I'm going to take the 2 coordinate points and divide them by 2. I know that that midpoint's going to be 6 because that's the x value of the midpoint. So then I solve it. I multiply both sides by 2, and I get negative 2 plus x equals 12. I add 2 to both sides. X equals 14. So I've got the first point for B, or first coordinate, 14. So now I have to find the other one, and I do the exact same thing, but with the y's. So I'm going to look at the y value for the endpoint that's given to me, which is negative 9. I'm going to add that to the y value that I don't have for that other endpoint, split that in half based on my midpoint formula, and set that equal to the y value of the midpoint, which is negative 3. Okay, so of course you solve it in the same manner. You multiply both sides by 2, and you get negative 9 plus y equals negative 6. And when you add 9 to both sides, you get y is 3. And that's your coordinate for that endpoint. All right. Do you have questions on 6? Remember, that's harder than finding the midpoint because you have to plug in an unknown because you don't have the endpoint. But once you figure it out, it's the same process, so it shouldn't take very long. It's just, it might be something difficult to remember. Okay. And then you do have a midpoint one. This one's easier. So I just add them and divide by 2. Add the x's, divide by 2. Negative 3 plus 7, divide by 2. Add the y's, divide by 2. So negative 12 plus 18, divide by 2. And then you'll get your coordinate points. So 7 plus negative 3 is 4, divided by 2 is 2. And then 18 plus negative 12 is 6, divided by 2 is 3. So that was much easier for the midpoint. All right. Questions? No? Okay. Is the following convex or concave? What is it? Any thoughts? Yes.
It's concave.
Yeah, it's concave. It caves in. Remember, if I just extend any side and it goes through the figure, then it's concave. So you'll have one of those, and then you'll have to classify it based on its number of sides. It's not going to be something like a dodecagon or something like that, but it will be one of the easier ones that you should know. Okay. Find the perimeter and area of a rectangle. I will tell you this right now. I'm not going to have you do a triangle like you did on the quiz. That took a while. You had to do the distance formula. I already assessed distance formula on a question before that. So the nice thing about rectangles is that you can just count them once you graph them on your grid, right? So that's all you need to do. I'll give you a grid. Just plot the points and count them. And then add all the sides up to get your perimeter. And remember your length times width for the area of a rectangle. So I'm going to go ahead and just plot those points really quickly. -5, 5. I'm just labeling, which is what I expect you to do anytime you draw your own grid, with an X and a Y. And I'm just going to plot the sides. So the first one is 4, -5. And I like to label it so I don't lose track. That was 4, -5 right there. Then the other one is -3, 1. Then the other one is -3, -5. And the last one is 4, 1. Then you can connect your shape. If you remember properties of your rectangles from middle school, then you'll know that two sides, the lengths are equal and the widths are equal. So you really just have to find one of the lengths and one of the widths. So that's why we have that formula, 2L plus 2W, to find that perimeter. So here, what's the measure of that length? 7. That's 7 units, which means this is also 7 units. What's the measure of this length? 6. 6 units, which means this is also 6 units. So what's the area? (42). Length times width, remember? 42 units squared. Remember the units squared. Perimeter is just going to be 6 times 2 plus 7 times 2, which is going to be 28. And that does not have the squared, so just 28 units. So you'll have a problem just like that, just with different coordinates. And it's a rectangle. Can you do it? Okay. And then you'll have something nice and hopefully simple, like number 10. You just have to know the word complement and supplement. Question so far? Yes. Huh? Let's see. What does it say on the key? It should be, 26. Yeah, I had it wrong. Thank you. Okay. Number 10. It says one angle is 51 degrees. What's its complement? When it asks for a complement, what's it want you to do? Subtract it from what? 90. So that's all you have to do. So take 90 minus 51. and you get 39 degrees. Okay, supplement, you have to subtract it from what? 180, so take 180 minus 51, and then you get the measure of its supplement. It should be 129, I believe. Of course, for your bonus question, I already told you that you're going to have a construction. You will have to copy an angle. So if you want to get the bonus question for extra credit, you will have to copy an angle for that. Do you have any questions about tomorrow? None? Okay, so here's what